Hello everyone, the Procedural Dynamic Paint version 2.1 is released with many new features, update and fixes. The first and really important update is that now all the nodes have their proper icons. Now you can easily recognize the nodes, and also they have their own proper categories in the asset browser. The main categories in the case tool is the dynamic paint. Then you have the displace category, flow, mask, paint and source. You can use these nodes as assets by assigning the dynamic paint folder as the library. When you download the dynamic paint, you will get this zip file. When you unzip this file, you will get all these files. You have all these folders and this documentation file. Basically, you have to assign one of this folder as a library in the Blender preference according to the Blender version. I'm using Blender 4.4 and I have assigned this folder as a library. Okay, dynamic paint, Blender version 4.4, version 2.1. Okay. So when you do that, you will get all these nodes in your asset browser, and from here you can drag them onto your object. For the documentation, I have rewritten this documentation. Now it is much more clean and clear. You will get all the information about each settings of the nodes, and I highly recommend you please read this documentation while using the dynamic paint preset. Okay. Now let's start from the new addition, that is the source, dynamic source node. This node is similar to the Pyro spread source nodes that is available in the Houdini, so it provides the similar functionality in Blender. Before we use this node, keep that in mind. You can use all these nodes for any mesh model, whether it is 2D, 3D or any kind of model. So for the sake of this video, I'm going to use the plane, but you can use these nodes for any kind of object. Okay, let's add a plane, and next we're going to subdivide this plane because these nodes works on the polygon basis of the geometry, so we need a decent number of subdivisions for the mesh geometry. Okay, you have two options. If you are familiar with the geometry nodes, you can use this dynamic source node to create the setup from scratch, or you can use this modifier. Okay, just click and drag this onto the object and it is added. Now let's go to the geometry nodes. So this is the basic setup for this, and let me go to the material preview. If we run this, see, we have this kind of effect. Okay, let me first explain the settings of this node and then we will discuss about the simulation. So this is the dynamic source node. First, you need to input the mesh geometry. Keep that in mind. Geometry should have a decent number of subdivisions. Okay. After that, you can use this animator geometry option when the input geometry is an animator like a character or something. So you can use this option. Then you have the simulation settings. Here you can define the start or end frame for the simulation. After that, you have the combustion settings. I have keep these settings very simple and minimal. You have three settings. First is the temperature mode. So this temperature you can assign to the fuel, air or fuel and air. Okay. If you assign this to the fuel, the fire will only spread through the connected regions by the temperature. See, these white regions are connected and the fire will only spread through these regions. Okay. If you set this to air, then the fire will spread through the neighboring regions, whether they are connected or not, it doesn't care. Okay. And then you can use the third option that will use both effect, fuel as well as air, or connected as well as neighboring regions. Okay, so they create different effects. Let me show you this. If I go to the air, so it will create this kind of effect. See, and if you get to the fuel, then you have this kind of effect. And if you set to both, then you have the mix effect. You can see the difference here. See, so these are the differences for the temperature mode. So you can use different masks to define the temperature. Suppose if we don't use any mask, then the fire will burn smoothly because there is uniform temperature. Or you can use this kind of mask, means without the noise, then the fire will burn accordingly. See, so with these fall of nodes, you can create really complex temperature maps. These fall of nodes are freely available with the extra nodes. I'll add the link in the video description. Okay. After that, you have the ignition. So here you need to specify the ignition region from where you want to start the fire. Like in this case, I am defining this region based on this circle, this Bezier circle. Then the fire will start accordingly. If we go to the first frame, see, it starts something like this. It will burn something like this. Okay. And after the combustion, you have the dynamic settings. You have the cooling rate, spread rate, and spread iterations. So this cooling rate is define the cooling for the region that is right now burning. Okay. So let me make this, let's say 2.5. It cool down the burning region really quickly. See, or you can make this really small. Then it will take a really long time to cool down the burning regions. See, then you have the spread rate. If I make this small, the fire will spread slowly throughout the geometry. See, really slow. If I make this, let's say 5, then it will spread really quickly. Or maybe 3. See, so these are the field inputs. So you can use even a different image texture or fall off nodes to define the cooling rate as well as the spread rate. If you want to really increase the spread rate, you can also increase the number of iterations. It will spread really fast. See, after that, you have the mask settings. You can smooth output mask that you want to use for the shading. See, you have the fire, ash, and burnt. So they are stored as attribute. They are fire, ash, and burnt that you can use here in the material. Here I'm using this source info node that provide all these attributes, fire, ash, and burnt. I'm using these attributes to drive the color for this material. And for color variation, I'm using this ash attribute to drive the noise texture. So to create this complex pattern within this color. So with this node, you can create really nice and complex materials for the effect. And along with this, you can also use the displace node that is available under this displace category. So you can use that to displace the geometry. Okay, let's use the fire. So you can use the fire to displace the geometry or something like that. You can also control the strength of this. Sorry, this one. Okay. You can even invert that, like something like that. It's too much, maybe 25. Now let's talk about the paint. Let me add a plane. Again, I'm using the plane for the demonstration purpose, but you can use these nodes for any kind of geometry, whether it is 2D or 3D. Let's subdivide this, something like that. In the paint, we have subcategories for the brush, solver node, and utility nodes. Okay. So in the solver node, you have the node and the modifier. Again, if you are familiar with the geometry nodes, you can use this node to build up the setup, or you can use the dynamic paint modifier. It has added the dynamic paint modifier. So this is the modifier setup. Go to the material preview. We have this. If you run this, see, this object brush is adding the paint to this geometry. Right now, the paint is not flowing because this geometry is facing upward, and we need to rotate this so that we can see the effect of gravity on this. Now, if we do this, See, the paint is dripping down. Okay, now let's talk about the settings of this node. So there is major updates to this dynamic paint. So the first update is that I have added the custom time step and substeps. So the substeps allow you to create really smooth paint onto a geometry, and with this substep you can basically control the speed of the simulation. Next, you have the brush settings. They are simplified. The first is the stroke input. You can use the brush stroke from the object brush, or you can use different brush that are available with the preset like curve base, mesh base, or object base. Or you can use the fall of nodes from the extra nodes to create a different kind of brush for this dynamic paint. Okay. Then you have the stroke density. This density is relative to the mesh resolution. So if I decrease this to, let's say 0.1, we have this kind of stroke, see? And if I make this 1, we have this really smooth stroke. Okay. After this, we have the stroke color, and here you can specify the color for the brush. Okay. You can even change this dynamically with the simulation. Next, we have the paint settings. There are two categories. These settings for the paint drop and these settings for the paint rates. Okay, different rates for different properties of the paint. So here you can specify the drop size, and you can also enable this option, that is a drop volume. While doing the paint dynamics, it's going to preserve the volume of the drop. Okay, then you have the drop life. So with this option you can specify how long each drop remains active for the painting. Okay, so this is really handy. Let me make this, let's say 20. See, these drops are deactivated after 20 frames. Then you can add the variation to the drop life using this vector. After this, you have the remove distance settings. This is really important. When these paint drops accumulated in some area of the geometry, and you can remove these drops based on this distance. Okay. Next, we have the second category, and here you can define the different properties of the paint like dry rate, spread rate, and dissolve rate. Like we can increase the dry rate, the paint will dry out really quickly. See, and after that you have the spread. It's going to spread the wet paint. See, see this spread. Then you have the dissolve. It's going to dissolve the dry paint. So let me make this, let's say 2. See, you can even decrease this. Okay. Then we have the dynamic settings for the paint drops. The first setting is the viscosity. You can specify the viscosity of the paint or roughness of the surface. So here I'm using the noise texture to define the viscosity. So let me go to the first frame, and also let's increase drop life. If we don't use the viscosity, we have something like this. See, we have this really smooth paint, and if we add the viscosity, we have something like this. See these variations. This is based on this viscosity texture. Okay. Next, we have the viscosity dynamic. Basically, this viscosity linearly increase with the age of the drop. Okay. Let me make this 35, and let's make this 0. You will see that the paint will suddenly stop when the drop reach its lifetime. See, this doesn't look natural. You can use this vector to add the dynamic viscosity to the paint. So the paint slowly or gradually stops when the drop reach its lifetime. See, After that, you have the velocity max option. This is the maximum velocity a paint can achieve. Okay. Then you have the second category for the forces, and here you can specify the strength of the gravity, and you can also control the custom forces. Okay, so this is the strength for the custom force. Like you can use the noise texture or something to create really complex forces. If you have extra nodes, you can use those forces as well to create really complex forces for this. Let me make this, and let's also decrease this. See, you have this kind of effect onto the paint. With this option, you can create really complex behavior for the paint. Okay. After that, you have the collision settings. Let's first enable this, and then we need to specify the collision object. And then we need to select the collision collection here. You can also use the procedural geometry for this. Okay. Now let me increase the drop live so that we can see the collision. Go to the first frame. And let me hide this collision object. See, the paint is spreading with this object. Next, you have the displace settings. So this is also new. So basically, this displacement is controlled by these settings. You can enable this, and here you can control the number of iterations. We have 1, 2, 3. You can also even go crazy, maybe 10. Okay. Then you have the flow option. If I make this 0, it's going to only displace the geometry along the normal of the surface. And with this, you can displace the geometry along the motion of the paint. Let's make this around 0.75. See, and this is the thickness parameter for this. Okay, we can make this really thick layer of paint. And this is the smoothness for thickness. This is with 0, and this is with 3. You can maybe go to 4 as well. After this, you have the mask settings. Here you can specify the name for the mask as well as the smoothness, and you can use these masks for the material. Okay, let's go to the material of this. So I have really simplified the material for this. You have the paint info node. You can use this node to build up the complex material for your paint effect, or you can use this paint mixer node. Okay. First, you have the base color, basically the color of the base geometry. So this gray color, you can define that here. You can also specify the roughness. Then you have the wet color, basically color for the wet paint. So with this vector, you can use the custom color as wet color. If you make this 0, then you can use the color from the brush. Okay. So basically this color. Okay. Then you can also specify the roughness for the wet paint. After that, you have the dry color, basically color for the dry paint. Again, here you have this vector. You can use the custom color for the dry paint, or you can use the color based on the brush. And you can specify the roughness for this. So it output the color, this mixed color, and then the roughness map, and also output the mask that you want to assign to them, like in this case metallic and clear coat, or you want to mix different materials, you can use this mask. So these are the settings for the paint material. Next we have the dynamic mask. Again, let's add a plane, subdivide this. Okay. You can build this from the scratch using this dynamic mask node, or you can add the modifier. Let's go to the geometry nodes. So we have this setup for the modifier, and here we need to specify the brush collection. So let's add maybe torus. Then we're going to add into a new collection. Let's call this brush, and let's select that here. Go to the material preview. Now, if we run this, we have dynamic mask on this geometry. Okay. First, you need to input the mesh geometry with a decent number of subdivisions. After that, you can enable this option, animated geometry. If the geometry is animated like vector or something, then you have the simulation settings. And I have added this new option, that is the sub steps. You can increase the number of sub steps when the brush is moving really fast to create a smooth mask. After that, you have the brush settings. Here you can use the collection, or you can use the custom geometry for the brush. And these are the different modes for the brush, like based on the points, edges, or faces. And these are the fall off settings for the brush, like size and fall off width. Next, you have the dynamic setting. For the dissolve, you have two options, based on the rate or based on the duration. So you can use a rate to dissolve the mask, or you can use the duration, particular number of frames, to dissolve the mask. Keep that in mind. These are the field inputs. You can use the noise texture to define dissolve rate onto a geometry. Like in this case, we have defined a different dissolving rate for different regions of the geometry. See, we have this complex pattern behind the trail. This is due to the different dissolving rate. Then you have the option to spread the mask or shrink the mask. So by default, it is off. Let's make this, let's 2.5. The mask will spread with time. See, it is spreading. Or you can shrink that with time as well. It is really fast. Let me use one. In the end, you have the mask setting. Here you can specify the name of the mask as well as the smooth iterations and weight to smooth the mask. And you can use this mask for the material. So let me show you the material. So here you can use this mask to control the different properties of the material. Okay, so this is the new dynamic mask node. Next, we have the displace, dynamic displace and dynamic displace modifier. Then you can add this modifier to the object. Let me go to the geometry nodes. So here we have the dynamic mask, and then we have the dynamic displace node. It is using the dynamic mask to displace the geometry. Okay, so here you can specify the selection for the geometry and then the strength. And here I'm using the mask to displace the geometry. Then you can specify the offset and the direction for the offset along the normal, or you can use the custom direction. So let's add brush, maybe cube here, this one or this, and let me go to this. And let's also increase the displacement, maybe 0.35. See, because it is based on the dynamic mask, we can even dissolve this, like let's say 0.5. So you can create this kind of effect with this displace node. In the end, we have the flow, dynamic flow node and dynamic flow modifier. So let's add the subdivision to this. And then you can drag this modifier into the object. And let's go to the geometry nodes modifier. So we have this dynamic flow, and this is the setup for the modifier. Let me also rotate this in the edit mode so that we can see the effect of gravity onto this, and go to the material preview. Yeah, something like that. See, in the previous version, the dynamic flow and dynamic paint are combined. Now they are separated. First, you have the simulation settings. You can specify the start and frame as well as timestamp. Then you have the flow settings. So you can use the UV flow. Basically, it's going to flow the UV map based on this dynamic settings, or you can also flow the mesh. It's going to flow the mesh based on the dynamic settings. Okay. Then you have the dynamic settings. Here you can specify the dam factor and the maximum velocity of the flow. Okay. For the dime vector, I'm using this noise texture. You can use any kind of texture to define the different or variation in the dime vector across the geometry. After that, you have the forces settings. So here you can specify the strength of the gravity and the overall strength for the custom forces. Then you have the mask settings, and here you can specify the name for the flow mask and as well as the smooth iterations. Okay, so for this you have this kind of material. Basically you have to use this attribute based UV map, and you can input any kind of texture for this. Okay, these are the major updates related to the dynamic paint. With this preset you will get all these project files. This is it. I hope you like this video. So if you like, then please like and share the video and subscribe to my channel for more updates. Thank you for watching. See you in the next video. Happy noding. Bye.